6 Bloodiest and Deadliest Wars in World History. War is hell. Some conflicts have caused more carnage than others, with the duration of warfare varying greatly, but one potential outcome of war is a large number of casualties. And some even fall into the category of the deadliest in history. Some of those numbers can be so high, it's almost impossible to find an exact number. Here are the 6 wars with the highest death toll in world history. 6. World War I. Starting in Europe, the First World War only lasted 4 years, from 1914 to 1918, but in such an industrialized time the level of death and destruction was something never imagined before. In Bosnia, Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, setting off a chain of events that occurred in almost every major country in the world. Germany was the big aggressor, and allies such as Britain, France, Russia, and eventually the United States, after Germany began sinking U.S. passenger ships, all took up arms against them. The sea and air became battlefields like never before in human warfare. Newer machine guns and artillery allowed for quick and efficient killing. In the end, it was who could generate more resources, and it was the Allies who won that race, leading to Germany's surrender in 1918. At least 18 million people around the world lost their lives in World War I. Almost 7 million of them were civilians. 5. Taiping Rebellion. One of a long list of devastating wars fought in China, the Taiping Rebellion took place from 1850 to 1864. It was a rebellion against the ruling Qing dynasty by a cult group known as the God-worshipping Society, who took issue with the economic conditions around them. The Taiping Rebellion even led to the group seizing the main city of Nanjing for over a decade. The leader of the rebellion, Hong Xiuquan, began to expand the reach of his worshipping society across China. By 1850, he began to see that his group was well armed and organized. They saw some victories as they defeated Qing forces in several cities, and the siege of Nanjing would be their highest point of struggle. But, once Europe joined the Qing forces, it was the beginning of the end. Hong was found dead in 1864, and the rebellion failed, leaving behind at least 20 million casualties. 4. Qing Dynasty Conquest. The Ming dynasty in China ruled from 1368 to 1644, overseeing a time that included much of the Great Wall being built, the printing of the first movable metal type, and the construction of the famous Forbidden City. However, in 1618, a rebellion against Imperial China began in Manchuria, setting in motion events that would topple the entire Ming dynasty. In 1636, a newly appointed Qing dynasty leader, Hong Taiji, crowned himself Emperor of China. The rebellious movement gained traction and extended to the capital Beijing, which was finally taken over in 1644. It would still take 40 years of bloodshed before the new Qing dynasty would establish itself as the new regime in China. During the conquest, more than 25 million people lost their lives. 3. Sino-Japanese War II. A war that raged around the same time as World War II, the Second Sino-Japanese War was fought between Japan and China from 1937 to 1945. Although initially a separate conflict, it was eventually absorbed into the fallout of World War II, and several other countries became involved by siding with one of the countries. The war originated from Japan's imperialistic policies. When Japan bombed the U.S. base at Pearl Harbor in 1941, America came to China's aid, which began to turn the tide of the Sino-Japanese conflict. The war between the two is often overlooked, as the more famous Allied and Axis battles are more prevalent in history books. When the U.S. dropped the atomic bomb on Japan in 1945, it effectively ended the Pacific theater of war, which also ended the Second Sino-Japanese War. Between 10 and 25 million civilians were killed in the most massive Pacific side conflict of World War II. 2. Spanish conquest of the Americas. The romanticized notion of people from Europe coming and discovering America leaves out a few key points. It was more like pillaging, and there was a lot of suffering, disease, and genocide. When Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, there were about 60 million people scattered across North and South America. But then white Europeans arrived with disease, slavery, and an overall murderous tendency, reducing the population to about 4 million. that's about 90% of the total indigenous population and triggering the extinction of traditional tribes there. It is believed the European influx killed so many people so quickly that global temperatures cooled for some time during the 1600s. So much farmland and forestry was left untended by the, now dead, natives that nature took over and gobbled up all the CO2 that normally makes the planet warm up. 1. World War II. Battles were fought in all parts of the world, between the Axis powers of Nazi Germany and the Western Soviet allies, with more than 30 countries involved in the conflict. Yes, it was World War II. The Soviets suffered the greatest loss of life among other countries, with 20 million people dying, some of whom were civilians. You would imagine that the Americans would have taken a sizable hit, but they lost a relatively smaller number of about 500,000. And we should also not forget the Holocaust, which occurred during the war, and which led to more than 13 million persecuted and victimized lives. Some reports say that more than 70 million people died during World War II, with 50 million of them civilians.